Hello again, everybody. Welcome back to the Dodgy Gear Show. This is Dodgy Gear Show 77. Yeah, going live at you again because I've just hit the the COVID inquiry there. So I found their live feed. They're actually directly from. It's called COVID inquiry. So I'm going to transition us over, and we're gonna follow through, and I'm going to pause it when I lose my rag. Yeah. Welcome to the show, everybody. Thanks for coming back and joining me. I hope I hope you're well, and I hope my functionality in my system keeps up with what I'm trying to do. Right, here we go. I'm gonna play this, and then I'm gonna let it run for a bit. Okay. Have a gathering of your thoughts about what you think. We've been waiting for all this for a very long time. I'll let it run for you. Thanks for the people that supplying the feed. Yeah.
The human resource side.
Yeah, there were huge changes in the cabinet office.
I'll just get myself out of the way.
And core teams that were put in charge of COVID were repeatedly created, repeatedly dissolved. We were repeatedly told in number 10 that they'd had burned out from stress and they'd gone. So yes, there was, I would say until by September, that was a little bit more stable. The task force structure existed. People had a much better sense of what their job was. It was still dysfunctional in various ways, but it was much different than it had been in May.
What about the Department of Health and Social Care as the lead government department? Your statement states that the DHSC was overwhelmed by the scale of the crisis in February to May. It couldn't build capacity on testing, on drugs, and was bad at asking the Cabinet Office for help. When it became apparent that the DHSC was unable to discharge the heavy burden placed on it as the lead government department, why were changes not instituted?
Well, I think the Cabinet Office was, remember, the Cabinet Office is responsible for dealing with a problem like that, and the Cabinet Office itself was overwhelmed. It was overwhelmed by the crisis. It was overwhelmed by its own staff being out with COVID. It was overwhelmed by internal ructions about how the hell this had all been allowed to happen. So I think the Cabinet Office was slow in getting to grips with the problem of the Department of Health. I think, though, also undoubtedly, I'm afraid that the story that the Secretary of State for Health kept telling us around the Cabinet table contributed to that. As the Cabinet Secretary himself said, Hancock has not the help he needs, and that's contributed to the problem. So I think, as they say in Moscow, everyone's white and everyone's unhappy. This was one of those examples that the Cabinet Office had serious problems, the Department of Health had serious problems. The coordinating mechanism to solve that itself had crumbled under the pressure.
What he didn't say was they don't have a procedure.
There were a large number of criticisms made by you of the Secretary of State for Health and Social Care, Matt Hancock. We'll look at some of those observations later. Where did you or number 10, however, suggest structural changes to the lead government department, to the DHSC, changes in the way in which it operated in order to ensure a better service in the face of this crisis? Where is that debate? Where were those changes proposed?
So also bear in mind, in April, when we really started to discuss this, I discussed it with the Cabinet Secretary. Of course, the PM had just nearly died and was off in Chequers. So discussing it was inevitably very tricky. But I talked to the Cabinet Secretary in April about these issues. We discussed the possibility of splitting up the Department of Health in various ways. Formally, informally, we discussed creating various task forces to take critical work away. And of course, we actually did that. In an ironically odd way, the scale of the nightmare in March, April actually made it much easier for us to make such a monumental decision as taking vaccines out of the Department of Health and creating a separate task force. Similarly on testing.
To pause you there, I'm going to ask you please to try to keep your answers a little more concise. I appreciate it's difficult. So the way in which task forces were set up was a reflection, if you like, of the understanding that the DHSC was not performing. So you had a test and trace task force, you had a vaccine task force, PPE task force, and so on.
Yes,
is that correct?
Correct. But to be fair, not just that they were that they were performing poorly. It was a once-a-century event, and they were clearly overwhelmed. And I think even if you imagined everything had been working 10 times better, there would still have been very powerful arguments for having specific task forces aimed at specific things.
All right. The inquiry's heard a great deal of evidence about the workings of SAGE, and the majority of that evidence has been received from members of SAGE, its constituent parts. From the viewpoint of number 10, did the SAGE government liaison, the process by which the government received advice from SAGE, work well?
So I think SAGE did a brilliant job at coordinating scientific expertise. But I think that the mechanism whereby SAGE's thought processes were conveyed to number 10 could be radically improved, because they were fundamentally oral briefings from Patrick Vallance and Chris Whitty. To number 10.
Pausing there, just to split those answers up, please, Mr. Cummings. In the reporting system through the Chief Medical Officer and the government's Chief Scientific Advisor, were those briefings by them to government recorded, or were they oral?
What do you mean by recorded? Do you mean minuted?
Well, were they minuted? Did they produce papers in support of everything they said, or was this funnel of communication largely an oral one?
No procedure, no process.
Of course, the private secretary would record notes from the meeting and then issue action points and other things.
Is that part of the procedure?
Private office.
The SAGE minutes were, as you've described them, consensus documents, and others have described them similarly. Did number 10 get a proper understanding of the width of debate that had taken place before SAGE and of the nuance of these extremely difficult and complex issues?
In my opinion, obviously not. I mean, there's no substitute for actually listening to these conversations oneself and interrogating people. I'm not saying by that that the SAGE minutes themselves were a bad product. I think they were a good product and a useful product. But if you're asking about the nature of a crisis like this involving the Prime Minister having to make extraordinary decisions, he obviously needed much richer information than the SAGE minutes could provide.
So the procedure, there wasn't a procedure, and they ended up coming up with nothing that was useful.
SAGE, and you say, on occasion, the wrong questions were asked of SAGE. Mm-hmm. You and we know, I think, Demis Hassabis, your friend, attended SAGE. Why did no one say to SAGE bluntly and plainly, we want you to indicate much more clearly what your recommendations are. We need a much clearer understanding of what you suggest. And this is the government strategy, so that you know to what you should direct.
They didn't know because they didn't have a procedure.
It wasn't my job to try and commandeer Sage and start giving them orders about how they should operate. I spoke.
See, that's what happens when you departmentalise transparency and accountability.
External people like Gowers and Hassabis to attend and review the paper.
Hello everybody, I think we're just having a bit of a prang there. It's crashing. There's so many people trying to view it. I think YouTube stops people getting the message out as well. I think the
smart and able
who came in. I'll bring you back in the room.
Help us. They said to me, the Cabinet Office is asking the wrong questions and misinterpreting the answers.
Yeah, sorry,
and that was a problem both before the first wave and as we emerged out of the first wave.
You asked your friend Ben Warner to attend Sage.
I did.
You spoke privately to the government's chief scientific advisor, Sir Patrick Vallance.
Easy now.
You hadn't held back from making recommendations in relation to structural changes that, in your view, were required to be made to the Cabinet Office, to Number 10, to the DHSC. Why did you not publicly say there is a real problem with the structural route by which Sage advises the government, and we are not getting a proper understanding of the picture?
Well, I don't think it would have been a good idea for me to say publicly something like that. But I did
to your colleagues in government.
I did say that to colleagues in government. I also spoke to Patrick about making the Sage. I also had a very strong view that the Sage minutes and other documentation should be made public in February for scrutiny. And actually, Patrick was very good about that, and Patrick completely agreed. Unfortunately, again, the culture of secrecy in the Cabinet Office blocked that, not just February, March, but actually kept blocking it for, I can't remember how long, but for a very long time.
In your statement, advice that the government received from Sage, you say that it was represented to the government that Sage was broadly in agreement with.
See where the blame game starts, everyone. Yeah? Oh, it wasn't my fault. They were holding me back.
Nay, as you call it.
They're departmentalised. I can't control their systems.
You were told that Sage members on the Sage committee, denied that they had been generally in support of a mitigation strategy.
Yes.
When were you told that that representation of Sage's position was inaccurate?
I'm not sure exactly, but you could start to see it.
I don't know. I'm not sure. I can't remember.
Lockdown happened. From that,
I must have been on holiday that day.
Each started to talk as if they'd been recommending this for a long time, whereas, as you can all see from the evidence, they weren't even recommending it in the week of the 9th of March.
That was obviously an extremely serious problem. The government's sole scientific advisory group for emergencies was not, it would seem to you, and what you were told, accurately giving you.
Hello to all the black suits there, sat there, bored as shit. Which one of you needs a piss?
The ways was actually worse than that.
Right.
That it was represented to us, even in the week of the 9th of March, that SAGE collectively agreed with the DH plan of single peak herd immunity by September. And indeed, as you can see from the public record on YouTube, many people from SAGE actually gave interviews that week.
Single peak what? When they're coming up with things now, innit? They've been thinking about things whilst you've been sat on the bog.
The first wave, Mr. Cummings, it was obvious to you that the information that you had received from SAGE on behalf of the government was to some extent inaccurate. It hadn't been a fair reflection on what you've said of the views of its members. SAGE, you say in your statement, had not made plain that there was a viable alternative to mitigation.
No procedure, no process, no alternative. Don't know, mate. What are you going to do about it?
The numbers of deaths and hospital cases would be massive.
Sorry, the last sentence is not accurate.
Until quite late in the day, when did SAGE tell you that they had concerns that the infection fatality rate and the infection hospitalisation rate would mean an inevitable wave of death and hospital cases?
I don't remember the exact date, but if you look at multiple graphs from Cobra that went through SAGE, you can see that people were envisaging a scale of death that would overwhelm the NHS, certainly in February.
Late February, wasn't it, Mr. Cummings?
I would say early February.
Envisaging paranoia's rife. Yeah, compounded, self-perpetuated paranoia and frickin', oh my God, I better go and frickin' bleach the frickin' peas, right?
Told us that. I would say that number 10 was told that was the consensus view of CCS in the Cabinet Office and Department of Health and SAGE, that
which part of the process was that? Who was accountable for writing that or handing it in, and who signed it or was over-signing it, or who is the accountable manager for the department that supplied that data?
In 2020. And that was what everyone was trying to avoid, and that's why the single major peak by September approach was taken.
Single major peak.
To that doctrinal debate, that strategy. But I'm asking you, Mr. Cummings, why, if it had become apparent to you that you had not been able to understand accurately what SAGE believed, or you had not received a fair reflection on what SAGE was debating, why, after the first wave, did you not bring about changes to the SAGE structure and the advisory structure in the way that you had advocated for the Cabinet Office, the DHSC, number 10, the Civil Contingency Secretariat, and so on?
Well, I literally did. I mean, we created the data science team, and part of the whole point of the data science team was that you had
created a team, but there's no process for them to follow.
Could red team and explore what SAGE was saying and give
guess
on what was coming from SAGE, how to interpret it, potential problems with the advice that was coming from SAGE.
But no structural way of analysing it.
Was data within Downing Street.
No detective work, right? Half of these people can't put their flipping underpants on properly.
Did you advocate or propose in relation to the constitution of SAGE and the means by which it informed government of its advice?
So the main thing that I personally did was to institute the 10 DS data science team, because that was the exact appropriate kind of thing that number 10 needed to interpret these scientific and technical questions with skills, with tools that didn't exist at all in January, February, March in number 10 or the Cabinet Office.
So there's the admission that there was no procedure, policy, process, transparency, traceability or accountability tree for any of it. He just admitted it there. They were guessing, Anyway, thanks for joining me. I'm Dodgy Git. This is the Dodgy Git Show live at 77. What a show.
Deep technical, scientific and data science skills and tools right at the heart of power that could interpret information coming in, not just from SAGE.
Got a spreadsheet, mate.
All around the whole system, including test and trace.
What system was that? Yeah, he mentioned a system. What system?
Entities.
All right. We're going to move on to a new issue, which is
It's somebody else's system that he doesn't have any implementation of or have any influence over or any capability of using, because he doesn't have a login, does he? Don't have a login for each other's companies, do you? There's no cross contamination of staff databases.
to what degree the position of vulnerable and at-risk groups was considered by decision makers in Downing Street
Don't know, mate. We guessed it, innit?
in the run-up to the decision to impose a national lockdown.
Could you say exactly what you mean by vulnerable and whatever it was? I saw you.
Yes, persons who
See, they're still fucking about with it.
the impact of a lockdown, members of minority ethnic groups, people who are vulnerable,
Me, myself, and I, Nan, Bob down the road, bus driver, taxi man with one leg. Yeah, who else?
whom there was plainly a case to be made that they would require specific consideration in terms of what the impact of the lockdown decision would be.
I would say that entire question was almost entirely appallingly neglected by the entire planning system,
Oh, good, he admits failure.
or any plan even to get a plan for
Aha, there's no plan, no procedure. There's
from the evidence.
no plan to even get a procedure.
Most appalling things of the whole enterprise in lots of ways was on the 19th of March when we realised that there was essentially no shielding plan at all, and the Cabinet Office was trying to block us creating.
Winging it
I think there was a
and stonewalling by bigger boys, right? Oh, we know better. We've got more fucking shit on our shoulders.
wives who were being abused and children in care and a lot of similar things, and I don't.
That's paranoia. Those people should be sorted out and protected already, right?
The Prime Minister was advised of the risk of long-term sequelae arising from COVID infection.
So I don't know what sequelae means.
Consequences, so persons who suffered from what is now known as the syndrome long COVID. When
What the fuck is long COVID? Nobody's ever explained it to me. It's just a fucking bullshit fantasy that came up from nowhere. It's a load of spellings, right? Words, cast illusions.
In general terms, in the sense of Patrick and Chris and others saying to us, of course, we don't know what the long-term consequences of this might be. They essentially said, there's kind of problem A, how many people it just kills immediately, but then there's problem B, what the long-term health consequences may be. At the moment, obviously, by definition, we've got no data and information on that. So we knew of it as a general problem in January, but it really kind of bubbled up, I would say, I'm guessing, I'm not sure if that's helpful, in roughly May.
I think in May, the Prime Minister shared on a WhatsApp group.
Who's the girl there in the bottom right when they're looking at that geezer asking questions? Wonder what she's doing for dinner.
An
Shouldn't say that, my girlfriend would kick my fucking ass. Welcome to the Dodgy Git Show.
What about the issue of the disproportionate number of deaths in the black and minority ethnic communities?
I mean, it was discussed after the first wave.
When did it first become apparent that there was a disproportionate fatality rate in those communities?
I can't remember, I'd be guessing, but I think the data that came out of the first wave showed that that was an issue.
All right. Much of your statement focuses on your opinion that there had been a critical failure to plan for the type of pandemic which, in the event, ensued, and an absence of critical capabilities, as you describe them. In essence, that In January and February 2020, there was no system, no plan, no structure in place,
To shave Ginger Bollocks' tash off,
either the borders to be sealed
or to take her out to dinner,
or any kind of scaled up test and trace process.
for a hat for the guy in the middle.
Two aspects in turn. In relation to the borders, the material shows that in Downing Street there was regular consideration, reconsideration of what could be done in terms of keeping the virus out of our border. What was the advice that was received from SAGE as to whether or not that would be an efficient or effective process?
It was twofold. First of all, it was that, threefold. First of all, we didn't actually have the ability to do it because obviously Britain has not been able to control its borders for many years. It doesn't have data.
What's threefold? Where did he pick that from? Is that part of a procedure he's following, or just what he's got in his head?
Capability. Second, we were told, even if we had the capability, it would only delay things by a relatively trivial amount. And third, of course, the people at that time, the reaction from a lot of people was closing the borders is racist. You remember when the supermodel Caprice said on TV, why aren't we closing the borders? A lot of people, public health experts, mocked her as if she was an idiot. That was the prevailing conventional wisdom from the public health system, and was reflected, the dismissal of Caprice, I would say, was reflected in number 10 by the public health system. And of course, if you're going for a single wave herd immunity by September fundamental strategy, then faffing around at the borders wasn't regarded as relevant or coherent with such a strategy.
By that, do you mean if the strategy of the government was to accept that by mitigating the worst severity of that first wave of the virus and thereby allowing a proportion of the population to become infected nevertheless, there was no point in trying to shut our borders because part of that strategy entailed allowing part of the population to become infected. Is that
correct? That's what the Prime Minister and I were told.
Told by who?
SAGE and NervTag specifically advised the government against border screening because
Who's nerve tags? Next one coming, eh?
you can't test in the absence of a testing for asymptomatic patients. You can conceal your symptoms. You may even become infected on a plane and no symptoms will show until after you've arrived.
But they didn't know, did they? They've already admitted he didn't know what he was doing. They're all running around panicking like headless chickens, trying to blame each other, and then already knowing that they departmentalised so much they can't affect each other's decision-making. Systematic ficking conference room resultants, right?
We were told that it was impossible. We were told the British state couldn't do it in January.
By who? Who's the accountable manager for that statement?
It didn't have any of the things that you need to do it to control the border. But at the same time, it wasn't regarded as a big problem, given that people didn't want to control the border anyway.
Oh dear, that's a wild statement, Mr. Cummings.
which was sent to the government and which you presumably saw, setting out why in practice screening, restrictions, or even an elemental quarantine system would not work in practice. It wasn't a doctrinal position, was it?
No, well, I think that obviously if you're just saying, do you actually control the borders, does that solve the problem? Of course the answer is no. And if you're looking at just at the specific issue of what the effect of controlling the borders would be, then of course the answer is clear, and what SAGE and NervTag said, Surge and NervTag said makes sense. But that's obviously not the real question. The real question is, should you have the capabilities like Singapore or Taiwan to combine actual serious border control with a domestic test and trace regime and the data to support it and all the other things you need to support it, and then roll out mass testing? If you had the capability to do that, which I very strongly suggest this country ought to acquire, then Obviously, controlling the borders is a critical issue.
Mr. Cummings, without a scaled up test, trace, contact, isolate system, shutting the borders will not suffice.
Correct.
Itself. So the problem here was not that there was a doctrinal decision not to consider shutting the borders. It was that in practice it would do no good, and without a test, trace, contact, isolate system, and there was none, it would never work.
Correct.
Is that the nub of the issue?
It's half of the nub of the issue, but the other half of the nub is that if you regard the whole thing in a fatalistic way anyway, which DH and the Cabinet Office and SAGE did at the beginning, and you think that there is no effective alternative to herd immunity.
No planning in place at all. Nothing. So the emergency response is for them to figure it out.
That the only plausible approach to this was to shape the curve of herd immunity. No one thought...
Shape the curve of herd immunity. That's allow it to be controlled, right? Control it, right? And then look what they did with the vax, yeah? How is that controlled? Yeah, that was controlled, wasn't it? Yeah, controlled rollout, right?
Yeah.
At what point in January and February, or indeed even March,
did you click the like and subscribe button at the Dodgy Git Show?
Absence of a scaled up or significant test and trace system effectively meant there was no means of controlling the virus once it had reached the United Kingdom.
Well, of course, until the week of the 9th of March, the entire system was just sort of rolling along the single peak strategy by September. And
what did he just say then?
Before that week too, we've obviously got to do more testing, but that wasn't really in the. That was more just sort of, we need more tests for the NHS.
It's just generalising. They're not following anything, are they? They're oh, now he's bringing the NHS into it.
Received at the end of February, beginning.
He would have got some advice from them, right?
Would be seen in April, May, June, i.e. scaling to hundreds of thousands, then millions, then potentially tens of millions. I think what really brought it home, certainly to me in the PM, was when we were suddenly told in that week of the 9th, and it was one of the things.
Hello everybody, I'm just bringing my ugly mug back into space to cover up them 3 bods in the corner there.
12th of March.
Yes, if you say so, I mean, it was around then.
And so that we can understand the importance of this issue, is it your position that if there had been a sophisticated, competent system for test, trace, isolate
if there had been one in existence
in January, February, March, and other countries, the inquiry is aware, did precisely that. South Korea is a very good example. It may not have been necessary to go the whole hog and to mandate the imposition of a national lockdown, because the means of controlling the virus would have been at hand with the test and trace system, and therefore no need to control it with a lockdown.
Yes, my view is that what ought to have happened is that as soon as the first reports came at the end of December, on roughly New Year's Eve 2019, we should have immediately closed down flights to China. We should immediately have had a very, very hard core system at the airports and borders, and there should have been a whole massive testing infrastructure ramping up, both for test and trace in a kind of conventional sense, but also a manufacturing and industrial capacity system to manufacture the rapid tests at scale. I mean massive scale of tens of millions a week. I think if you'd had that combination of actual serious border control and this country for the first time ever actually controlling its borders and taking it seriously with test and trace, and then a kind of out of the box, here's how you massively scale rapid testing, and you put all of those things together.
But I'm just going to stop him waffling on a minute, because by this time, hadn't the old what's-the-name, the old formula for the doodah, yeah, that had already been created by this time, hadn't it? Yeah? You've already got all the patent documents, right? So, yeah, is he being fed shit? Is that it? He's being fed on bollocks, right? So he's just been fed some, maybe from some CEOs from these highly paid positions in these fucking corporations that are protected by the finance protection of the ability to employ the world's best solicitors. Yeah? Lawyers, solicitors, whatever. Fucking people stood there with stuff in front of them that they punt in a certain direction.
From me to Singapore and
what do you think of all this lot? Yeah? There's a lot of ahs, if, buts, not sures. Well, it was their fault. So, well, they told me, and I just told them what they said to me because that's what I was supposed to be doing. It's like, what? It's all bollocks, isn't it? Yeah, the body language is the fucking, Oh, now he's going into fucking doctorate. Oh, goodness gracious! He'll end up getting himself in a corner.
First wave doesn't,
in my opinion.
to months. The best policy is to mitigate it, to take the top off, delay
Well,
it so it's closer to the summer.
welcome to the Dodgy Git Show, everybody. Thanks very much for joining me again for this wonderful show. We're at the Covid-19 inquiry. Yeah, there's lots of bods sat there. Yeah, thanks for joining me. Thanks for clicking on me. We're on show 77. We're pretty much live and direct here. We've got a few pauses here and there. What I want to see, right? I want to see bits of paper with notes and arrows and things. Because just mentioned wave this and plan this and peak that and test and trace this. Look, second devastating wave. Was that created because they let the thing in? I don't know. This is what we're trying to find out. This COVID inquiry. Say with Dodgy Git. Thanks very much for joining me. Let's see what other waffly gumph will be cast to us. Here we go. We've got the Department of Health involved, so none of it. Yeah, here we go.
plans to do that, but they were not thinking at that time about test and trace. Once we made this flip,
nobody was thinking about it, were they?
About the 13th to the 15th.
Oh, he's quite specific with those dates, but other things he's just like, oh, well, up to September.
And Valence and I talked to the PM about it on Sunday, the 15th of March, as part of...
Why does he know those days specifically to hand, eh?
Of the problem.
You misunderstand me. During that first stage with Plan A, with mitigation, the argument being put against suppression was it'll recoil like an uncoiled spring with a devastating second wave. If you push the first wave down, it'll spring back.
Yes.
So before the change in strategy, why was it not understood? Well, don't worry. We will deal with the first wave, but by the time the second wave comes along, if it does recoil like an uncoiled spring, we can deal with it with a proper test and trace system. Why wasn't that debate had when the government was still in the first strategic response?
So if you're asking why were we not talking about test and trace before roughly, say, the 13th of March, yes. The answer is because no one, before, remember, in the first time that there was no plan for lockdown at all in the week of the 9th.
Bad panic.
After we started to change. So there was no... The whole point of the problem up to the week of the 9th was that the whole system fatalistically thought there was no way you could possibly do a lockdown in Britain. It was thought of as the completely crazy idea. So, of course, people were not thinking...
the 9th to the 13th of March.
Lockdown's mad because it will all come back.
But they were thinking about, and they were advocating, suppression. That is to say, the squashing down completely of a first wave.
No, sorry, no. Who do you think?
Yeah, suppression of what?
Wave strategy, Mr. Cummings, envisaged a mitigation, and then this argument arose as to whether or not a suppression strategy which allowed the wave to recoil, the spring to uncoil, would result in a second devastating wave. So why was there not a debate about what could be done to prevent that second wave? Why was it not thought about?
Well, I think I'm not quite. Possibly I'm confused by your language. I don't know. I'm not quite understanding your question. But I'll try and put it this way. Up to and including the week of the 9th, the assumption was so you're suggesting there was some.
By who?
There wasn't a debate. There was an assumption.
By who? If there's no debate, who was it?
Department of Health and SAGE. Lockdown was impossible in a Western country. Anyway, we didn't have the all of the things that you needed in place to actually do it. You didn't have test and trace and whatnot.
They were paranoid, we'd rebel.
Vaccines were almost definitely not going to have any impact, at least in 2020 and possibly never. So the whole point was that up to and including.
How did they know that? Is that because of what I just said? Yeah? They already knew.
There wasn't a debate about the fundamental assumptions underlying Plan A. There wasn't a debate until me and others started.
What exactly was Plan A?
If you actually follow the logic of what Plan A is.
What is that then?
And we have to ask these questions and we have to consider an alternative Plan B. But before.
Oh, surely you've got to Plan B as soon as you've asked the first question that's different to Plan A.
Specific level between mitigation and suppression. But it may be that that debate and the merits of mitigation versus suppression simply didn't reach your level in government. And that you weren't aware the scientists were debating.
They didn't know how to do it. They weren't educated enough to do the yes-no things. On, off, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. They didn't do it.
The assumption from
they've all got slip-on shoes, I reckon.
Impractical. And everyone was still on the mindset of a flu pandemic. So, of course, there were debates, in one sense going on, and there were scientists, et cetera, et cetera. But the core of what we were presented with in number 10 was there was unanimity between the Cabinet Office, Department of Health and SAGE in the propositions that the real danger is a second wave in the winter, and therefore you have to manage a single peak strategy so there's herd immunity by September. That was the core argument that we were presented with. And that was never really proper. The first time
I would really like to see all those plans, notes, documents and everything else that's handed in by he says other people. Yeah, essential plan, look. It's so convoluted. They had nothing in place to deal with it.
Of the absence of debate, the failure to consider any alternative, the failure to consider strategic options other than mitigation and squash the sombrero, was that there was a woeful absence of
playing. What's that game where you have to hit the thing? Not Hungry Hippos. Fucking whack-a-mole, isn't it? They're playing whack-a-mole, isn't it?
Building, quarantine.
Correct. I mean, I would say it's actually worse than that, and sort of doubly ironic, because if Plan A had been what ended up being Plan B, i.e., we'd actually got on top of it and controlled it, and you had a test and trace infrastructure and everything else, then there would actually be a much stronger argument for saying, well, a lot of the shielding stuff we don't need, a lot of this we don't need, a lot of that we don't need, because we've actually controlled.
There, see, he's already said a load of different things. That would have created more than Plan A and Plan B. That's already created Plan A, B and C just by what he said there, because it's 3 different options, 3 different resultants, and therefore 3 different routes to the next fucking problem or not, no?
What you're describing, because if you are not going to control the virus, if you are not going to have test and trace, if you are just going to have single peak herd immunity by September, it actually makes the lack of a plan for shielding and care homes and everything else even more crackers. Do you see my point?
Yes. And to be fair, you texted Mr. Hancock on the 23rd of January about the existence, the whereabouts of pandemic plans and preparations. I think you asked to what extent have you investigated preparations for something terrible like Ebola or flu pandemic, and you were reassured that there were full plans up to and including pandemic levels prepped and refreshed.
That's interesting.
It became obvious, and it's obvious from your statement, that you appreciated that there were no plans of the type that you've described. By the middle of March, so 16th of March, a week before the national lockdown, had number 10 still been provided, or had it been
9th to 16th, there you go, a week.
plans, Cabinet Office plans from line departments dealing with these various aspects of a coronavirus pandemic?
Essentially, no. There were all dribs and drabs came in. You can see from various evidence of texts and emails from me. After talking to Hancock, I pushed on some of these things through February.
I'm just going to nip away for a second. I'll be back in 2 ticks.
Ron did as well from private office.
2 shakes
but
of
we
a lamb's tail.
gradually became aware through the course of February that essentially what Hancock had told me on the 25th, sorry, correction just on the date, by the way, the inquiry and I have wrongly changed the date from the 25th to the 23rd of that text message. So my statement is now wrong, but it should be 25th, but we'll correct that afterwards. But yes, during the course of the 25th, the course of February, we realised gradually as we pushed and probed and asked questions for these plans that they fundamentally didn't exist. And on the 16th, I think you're probably referring to a shocking email in number 10 that says, essentially, the Civil Contingency Secretariat says that these plans are not even held centrally at all. So it turned out, to our horror, that the system that we'd been told repeatedly in number 10, trust the system, SPAD shouldn't get involved, world leading, best prepared in the world, blah, blah, blah. It then turned out that this supposedly brilliant system, the Civil Contingency Secretariat, had not even seen these documents at that time because they were not held centrally, which was, I mean, when that email was circulated, people thought it was almost like a spoof.
All right. Well, in fact, we do have, of course, your text message to Matt Hancock in his reply. Your very own letter and statement have a screenshot, and it shows the 23rd of January. It says in terms 23rd of January 2020.
It does. The reason
to
for that
what
is,
extent have you investigated?
It does. The reason for that is I was told by the inquiry I got the date wrong and I should change it from the 25th to 23rd. But I actually checked it and it should be the 25th.
Don't trouble yourself. Your own screenshot provides the date of the 23rd of January 2020. So,
Bit of an anomaly, but it's interesting to know that he's talking directly to Matt Hancock, isn't it? Yeah.
it's an important COBRA meeting, the 5th of February, 6215. Page 1 sets out the ministers who attended. Page 2, the officials and those who dialed in. And we can see that on behalf of number 10, Imran Shafi attended along with Sir Ed Lister. Page 3, the attendees in terms of the chief medical officers. Page 5, paragraph 2, the CMO provides an update to COBRA, providing information about the number of individuals and how long they had been in hospital before they died. This is all to do, of course, with cases abroad, and particularly China. The two most high-risk groups appear to be the elderly and those with pre-existing illnesses. If you could scroll back out, page 6, between paragraphs 9 and 11, there was a debate about planning for a reasonable worst-case scenario. And the director of the Civil Contingency Secretariat sets out the planning priorities for the work underway to develop planning assumptions for the pandemic flu reasonable worst case scenario. There is then a debate about communication strategy, an emergency bill, and work with local resilience forums. On this day, or the day after, you sent a text to a WhatsApp group, the Number 10 Action WhatsApp group, saying the chief scientist told me today it's probably out of control now and will sweep the world. Were you aware of the tenor of the debate and what was being discussed in Cobra on the 5th of February?
Oh, a month before.
Don't remember that particular. All of these meetings now
Don't remember.
into one another.
Had you seen this minute of the 5th of February,
He would have changed what he just said, right?
you have understood that
Oopsie daisy, stood in the bucket of poo-poo.
which was to the effect that the virus was probably out of control now and will sweep the world.
So he didn't give a shit anyway.
Concern you?
Look at him, look at him, look at him, look at him.
What did you do around the 5th and 6th of February to say this Cobra appears to be proceeding on an incomplete...
This is brilliant.
It isn't reflecting what I understand.
I was on holiday, mate. I was in Barbados. I was on my yacht in international waters.
So I can't remember exactly
No shit, but you can remember before.
the exact days and whatnot, but around this,
But you could about March the 9th to the, what was it you were studying?
I spoke to Patrick again.
Oh, it's Patrick's fault then. I bet he said, didn't he?
5th, 6th, 7th. We had a conversation about this and about the briefing of the PM. Patrick and I agreed that we thought the PM had not been sufficiently...
5th, 6th and 7th. He said he didn't know what days it was. It was 3 years ago.
That I would fix up for there to be a meeting as soon as possible with the PM in his office, and that meeting happened on... I mean, it'll be in the documents, I can't remember exactly when, but very, very shortly after this. I think Patrick said to me something like, this needs to happen straight away. It's possible that was the Friday, and I think...
So he didn't trigger it himself.
My recollection of these...
Blaming it on somebody else for telling him to do something. Oh, well, he needed to tell me to do it. No, mate, you're independent. It's like you can't control the guy from Sage, can you? Yeah? Works both ways, pal.
So that would fit with what you've said. There was another Cobra meeting on the 18th of February, 56227, pages 1 to 3 give us the attendees, and page 5 gives us a sense of what was being discussed.
Interesting, eh? Better go and read that.
Repatriation of British nationals.
All right, bringing people home.
And then over the page, legislation, a debate about the drawing up of a bill to be employed in a reasonable worst-case scenario. And then over the page, please, page 7, planning for a reasonable worst-case scenario, next phase. The Civil Contingency Secretariat said there was work to be done to create a clear plan of activity from the moment of sustained transmission to its estimated peak. Was there an understanding in number 10 that a debate about repatriation and the drawing up of appropriate legislation and the drawing up of plans to deal with a reasonable worst-case scenario did not really reflect what needed to be done in response to the information that was then available?
Certainly by some of us in number 10 at that time, there was, yes. But remember,
Some of us see it's not him.
people in the centre of Whitehall were off on holiday at this time.
Oh, look, they're on holiday.
The evidence shows received a note in his box on the 30th of January. Virus. He expressed the view on the 31st of January that he wanted to spend more time discussing issues with ministers, and then he received an update on the 3rd of February from the Civil Committee's Secretariat.
Over the weekend, right?
An email with an update on the 8th of February, and the meeting on the 10th of February.
To the end of the week, right, I think.
The diary for that, 136739. This is the diary for the Prime Minister between the 10th of February and Friday the 14th of February. On the 10th of February, so you're right, it's a Monday, 10:45 to 11:15, coronavirus update. Before he went to Cheveney, which he did on the 14th of February, he received a note in his box, 136743, page 4.
You're going to bring that up then? Let's have a look at that, Doc. What's he going to pick out of that? All these dates need to align. Somebody needs to make one of them timeline things like, yeah.
Key part of preventing the spread of the outbreak to the United Kingdom. If what you were told by the chief scientist was right, the chief scientific advisor was right, Mr. Cummings, that there was an inevitability or a probable inevitability to the virus sweeping the world, then any debate about whether or not the virus could be contained in China was
Where is my tin hat? I need my tin hat and my shield of steel. No, it's made out of cardboard. I got it from IKEA. Fuck's sake.
Why was the Prime Minister not told? Evidence is now emerging that this virus is out of control.
Oh, dear me.
And will likely sweep the world.
Oh, yes, please.
And debate about international repatriation and drafting of legislation.
I want to go home.
Doctrinal identification of reasonable worst-case scenarios is behind us.
We
need to deal with that loss of control.
Well, I think there was still
wibble, link window.
I think there was still an awful lot of. So at the meeting that Patrick and I asked for.
Wibbling around the point. Watch him again, covering up his mouth almost. Don't want to talk, does he?
But remember, at that point, it was still not at all seen in Whitehall like this is going to be. Nobody really in Whitehall thought that a month from now we're going to be in the biggest crisis the country's seen since 1945. The view was much more that if this is really going to happen, it's not going to happen for months. And you can see repeated references in documents to number 10 and the Prime Minister that refer to, well, if there is sustained community transmission in Britain, then the crisis will come sort of 2 or 3 months after.
So was this one peak curve sort of, was it trying to be forced by not shutting certain things down in time, or letting people in this way or that way? Interesting, isn't it? Thanks for joining me on Dodgy Git Show 77. Thanks for joining me. 7 and 7, yeah? Used to be 7 planets we used to be able to see with our naked eye before all those other things got up there in the sky. Yeah, something like that. Yeah, and the 7 days of the week, isn't there? Yeah. 7 heavy metals too, aren't there? Are there? There used to be something like that. Copper, gold, silver, tin. Interesting, that, yeah? Yeah. Heps of a problem for people, isn't it?
Week before the Prime Minister departed for Cheveney, why was that message re-communicated to him in notes that were sent to him? Why was he not being told in this note? Well, the chief.
Notes. See, no procedure.
It's coming.
Well, I think it was just part of the general view from the Department of Health and the Cabinet Office that this was all still, murky and in the future. They weren't banging alarm bells at this point. Far from it. They were going skiing.
Why weren't you there?
They were going skiing. This is going to make news for weeks.
Well, as you can see, I spoke to the Chief Scientist on multiple occasions, and I organised a meeting for for him and Whitty to come in and talk to the PM and as they requested.
In the notes that went to the Prime Minister around the same time, why did you, as his advisor, perhaps chief advisor, not tell him? My information is containment has failed, the virus is coming.
Well, I did tell him that.
It's not here.
Well, the fact that things are not written down doesn't mean that they weren't communicated. Obviously,
Oh, but it needs to be documented, right? Or you're leaving yourself open to risk, aren't you? For that, you're not insured, right?
January onwards. So lots of things like this I passed on. But overall, as you can see, the system was not in emergency mode at this time.
Do you accept that there?
What exactly is emergency mode? Was it those papers that didn't exist?
The information from the chief scientist is to the effect that containment has likely failed.
I mean, you have the documents, not me, so I'm sure if you say so, I'm sure that's right.
Oh, well, if that's what was going round, then no wonder Whitehall didn't care.
I think probably time for a break. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, we're having a little break. All right, we'll pause it there. We'll thank them very much for the presentation there, and we'll give respect there to that overseer of shenanigans that's going on there. Are we gonna let's see? There we go. I'm back live and direct with ya. Yeah, say thank you very much to those people over there at the COVID inquiry. Yeah, put in Mr. Cummins there through a little questioning session, asking what he was doing, where he was doing it, how he was doing it, who he was doing it with, and how he thought they were doing it back to him. And it all comes out in a wash, doesn't it? It is funny how people communicate and talk and say, you know, people say, if you say I do this, I did this, I went there, I think this, I think that, I do that, I like that. People say, oh, that's you've got a self-importance thing because you're sort of hunting attention. Yeah, but then you've got the other people that say, oh, well, he said and she said and they said, and well, I didn't really know. So then then the other person came in the room and they said this. So when we did that, yeah, it's not claiming responsibility for anything whatsoever. Yeah, actually leaving other people to be in the shit and then just, oh, well, I'll just keep my head down and won't fucking say anything about it. All right, really? But you see how his face changed when he went back about how many months? Oh, well, in January this, I did this. In January 9th, I did that. On the 13th, I did this. On another one, I did this. On another one, I did that. Yeah. I did these all on these dates. Yeah, I did them all. I did this date on that date, and I met this person on this date in this place, and we said this and this discussion, and he knew precisely. And he said, all right, then what were you doing in January? And he went, I don't know. I wasn't there. Everybody else was out. Oh, yeah, they were all skiing. Yeah. Doesn't it just put the blame on somebody else? Puts the blame on somebody else and then makes them look like they're being negligent. Yeah, they could have been quite entitled to have their holiday. Why is holiday always mismanaged to the point that everybody's out all at the same time? Mismanagement. Is it mismanagement? I think people going on stupid long holidays and spending shitloads of money somewhere for fucking no reason at all apart from to go woohoo for 10 minutes. It's fucking sometimes a bit fucking pointless. Although it does make the world go round and it's fun, isn't it? Hey, why not? Fuck it. I love seeing the world. I love exploring the world. Love going all over the world to do whatever needs doing in the country it needs doing in, isn't it? You go somewhere flipping hot, you probably end up wearing what they wear. Yeah. It's adaptation. Did we learn to adapt? Have we learned to adapt? The government there was saying that the advice was that the advice is that they're going to follow this procedure that they had, right? That's what he said. Going to follow the procedure they had, and yeah, said they're going to follow the procedure they're going to have. And then when it came about, he's like, well, where's the procedure? And they're like, oh, well, here it is. And it wasn't actually a procedure. It was like a post-war attempt at what? So it is a bit of a conundrum as to who was responsible for what and when. Yeah? Who was responsible for what and when, and who passed what knowledge to who for what reason. Yeah? And was it their responsibility to pass it on? Like we're talking about, it's all about procedure, the structure, the managerial responsibility and management of who. It's accountable management, isn't it? Yeah. Who's accountable for who? And who's accountable for everybody? Yeah? Sometimes you hear a rumour from somebody in the lavatory. Right? It's not always advisable to take it as gospel, is it? You take it on board, it might be totally applicable, might be very important piece of information you critically need to know. Just work a bit better like this. We get there. Yeah, sometimes my the Steamship Dodgy, which is the computer that runs this show, is somewhat aged. It does struggle sometimes. I've had some very dodgy shows. But if you've tuned in and you've liked and subscribed and you've been interested in the content, then I suppose it's been beneficial to everyone, hasn't it? Yeah. I'm sat here still with a coffee on the screen. Yeah. Watched a few bits and pieces, and then thought, oh well, I better get back to it. How long do these bods normally go and have their? See, this is. Do you see what they've done? Yeah. This is what's so funny about government systems, right? It's a few minutes before, or okay, it's 3:10. Yeah. What happens at 3:10 in a secondary school? You have you have break time, don't you? Afternoon break. So you have 15 minutes to go and run about, kick a football in the playground, go and chat to your mate, jump about, run around, do nothing, sit in the corner, read a book, go and water fountain, climb a tree in the playground. Yeah, all those sort of things. 15 minutes back in, isn't it? Do your last lesson before the end of the day. Yeah, that's how the court system works. They're still like that. Yeah, you do have long days if you go to court. Court can be quite long. Sometimes they go on late because they don't want to run into the next day because it's taken time to get everything out. Yeah? It does sometimes. Takes time. That's why they give time, I suppose. But yeah, we are there now. It's having an inquiry. Big room of people. When they cut round to the rest of the room, there's a good 30 or 40 people in there, and what's been said is quite astonishing. I should have made a few notes there as we went through, but the way he dropped people in the shit, or said, "Oh well, it's just fucking like that, wasn't it?" It's promoting this to the rest of the world. Nobody like England's like. It's got no rudder, the fucking centreboard's been fucking sold, the fucking sail's got fucking holes in it and been fucking drawn on, yeah? And the fucking rigging's been fucking set alight. It's fucking just bobbing around, barely fucking getting there, innit? Don't even know which direction it's going. And there might be a wave here and a wave there, it gets fucking pushed one way and back again. Yeah, what a fucking palaver. But the way he came out with good 3 or 4 pop points there, at least, about how he dropped people in the shit. Well, it's not, it's just fucking, it's public humiliation of a department or a group of individuals, what's the word? We wrote it down and did a little video about it, didn't we, earlier in fucking video 76, if you want to go and check that out. I made that earlier today. See, I don't often do 2 live shows a day, but I did. Yeah, collective responsibility. Yeah, it's exactly what we were talking about, where there's zero accountability. Collective responsibility. Go and watch show 76, please, everybody, as I throw my pen on the floor. Won't even bother getting that up for now. I'll probably pick it up with my foot in a minute. Yeah. Yeah, no. What do you reckon? Have you been affected by the old, do you know what I mean? Have you been affected by that? You might have been affected by that. You've been affected by the cold you got. Did you get the flu? Did you get the flu? I got the flu like fucking hell, at least 3 times. Yeah, I didn't have a thingy, what's the name, did I? Yeah. So it says, be kind, be happy. Yeah? No, I didn't get one of them things in me, what's the name? Oh, excuse me. Nice brew, cup of tea. Yeah? English tea, 2 sugars, big teaspoon, not one of them fucking fancy little tiny fucking things. 2 good fucking things of sugar. Yeah? Blob of milk, good blob of milk, not too much, like. Just squeeze the bag in your tea bag. Yeah, do you squeeze the bag? Yeah, what were we gibbering on about? I can't fucking remember. Second dodgy git show today, you see. Excuse me, I get quite parched talking a lot. But it's been interesting, isn't it? Hey, interesting. You see how it functions. See the functionality of the systems we have in place, which fail when tested or even asked for. I phoned up my council a few weeks ago, and I got the antagonistic. What were they? Module 2. I think they're coming back from a break. I'm going to hover around on the page, and so they've turned off the comments, and you've got no flipping chat, so you can't put anything, which means that they're in denial of proactive feedback for continuous improvement. Oh, here we go. We've got Baroness Heather Hollett. Okay, Mr. Cummins. Right, hang on. Let me get back in my studio, and I'll have to select the window. That's that one with that picture, and then I have to drag my doodah about a little bit to get my picture half decent for you, so it don't look like a twazzock on the screen, because I closed it because I wanted to refresh it. And then I need to plonk me on the top, click me, figure out where shall we put me? We put me back over there. I'll try and tuck my head out the corner. Right, and then we'll flip these things around, and there you should see me. And then if I click this other button over here, that should bring us up to date with some noise.
The pace of the government tempo, the tempo of work in government, declined.
There we go. I hope you can hear everybody. We're back with the Covid-19 inquiry, live and direct with me, Dodgy Git, here on the Dodgy Git Show. Thanks for joining me. We're borrowing this live feed from the inquiry itself, direct from another
24th
YouTube.
of February.
We're going over dates. He's checking his dates, and he'll end up falling over.
Why was that?
He said half term. He was talking about people going on holiday, snowboarding and stuff earlier.
The general perception of the senior people handling this in the Cabinet Office, DH, at the time was that if they proved
Hang on, I'm just moving myself about a bit.
be a big problem, and it still was an if, then it was seen as really quite a distant problem. It was not seen as an emergency crisis. And secondly, as you remark, I did not go on holiday, but many of the senior people were on holiday during that time, including the PM.
There was no Cobra between the 18th of February and the 26th of February, was there?
Don't know.
There were no cabinet meetings during that time, do you recall?
Don't recall.
There were no notes sent to the Prime Minister or emails between the 14th of February and the 24th of February.
I find that...
Oh, sorry, I'm dragging something about and it just messed me about.
a gap in the paperwork than reflecting reality.
In relation to coronavirus?
Don't know.
He went to Cheveney on the 14th of February. He
Cheveney?
Street 3 times for work. His diary shows that there were a handful of meetings while he was in Cheveney. But he...
Get your chin off your hand, you lazy slouch back, fuck with it.
Coronavirus between the 14th of February and the 24th of February. You were part of that team. Why was he not kept in the loop in relation to the developing crisis?
Well, partly for the reasons I've already said. It wasn't seen as a
Which you can't remember.
office and by the cabinet, by the systems responsible for dealing with crises. When he did briefly reappear for meetings, or for example,
Is that a pretend relax? Because that's not a very comfortable position, is it? That's like a pretending confused, I'm not sure what to do, I want to cover my mouth and hide my head, isn't it?
You say there was a lack of understanding that there was a crisis. You had received text messages or information yourself that the virus was...
Not one of those other people has got their chin on their hand, have they?
That there was now clear evidence of sustained transmission outside China. You knew, and Number 10 knew, that the virus had exploded in Italy. And you knew there were cases already in the United Kingdom. How can it possibly have been thought that there was no crisis?
well, as I said, round about when the Prime Minister went away on holiday after the reshuffle, around about sort of 13th, 14th.
Distraction.
13th, 14th of February looked very, very different to 28th of February. So things evolved a lot over that period of time. You are, of course, I mean, your fundamental point is obviously correct, that there was indeed a massive crisis. It was indeed pretty insane that so many of the senior people were away on holiday at that time. But it's also important to realise that it's not like the Civil Contingencies Secretariat or the National Security Council or any of the organisations in charge of this were beating the drum and saying, we've got to get the PM back, this is a massive crisis. In fact, quite the opposite. As Patrick Vallance and others have pointed out, but apart from me, the NSC and other things were treating it like the rest of Whitehall was, like
Apart from him, see, like he wants to stand out, like he's the flag bearer.
As you've described it, for them to be away, to be on holiday, or
I was the saviour.
be a complete absence of administrative push in relation to coronavirus during that 10-day period. Why?
Sorry, I'm moving myself around again because they keep messing
Why
with the
were you
screens
banging
on
on
purpose.
the metaphorical
Yeah.
door of evening saying, you've got to come back. We have a crisis. This virus is about to overrun us.
Well, I was talking to all sorts of people in that
Run
period.
over us, more like. Oh, no, I don't like being there.
I was not on holiday, and I was pushing and talking to Patrick and other people.
Pushing real
But I did
good.
not regard,
Dun,
and neither did other people, we did not think that asking the PM to come back and talk to Cobra or Whitehall in general at that point would have been productive. In fact, I thought it would have been counterproductive, because I thought he would have said to everybody what he thought at the time, which was, this is another swine flu, it's all another rubbish media hoax, nothing will happen, blah, 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 blah. The real danger is the economy getting talked into a slump. I thought that if he came back from Chevening and said that to Cobra or to any other organised,
It's
any other
interesting,
part of
isn't
government, it
it?
would be counterproductive rather
This
than
is
helpful.
interesting.
So are you saying
They
you
moved me
did
about again.
actively consider the possibility of asking him to come back and talk to Cobra or Whitehall?
Yes, it was discussed while he was away.
With who?
I discussed
I'm gonna play shuffleboard again with
it with
everything.
Imran,
There
and
we
I
go.
discussed it with Martin and others in number 10.
Is there any record or any note whatsoever of that debate, Mr. Cummings?
Don't know.
Don't know.
Are you surprised
So we ain't got any then.
there is no note, as far as we can tell, of asking the Prime Minister to come back and take charge of the crisis?
No, not surprising, because there were conversations. It wasn't, there was people all in the same, sitting next to each other at work.
Well, you're not averse to sending WhatsApps and texts 24 hours a day, Mr. Cummings.
No, I'm not. But as I say, I was sitting right next to Martin and Imran. I didn't have to. This was conversations that we had around the office at that time.
See, now it's just conversation. See, there's no traceability. They weren't following a procedure. There wasn't a process in place. Nobody felt that they were at risk by any of it at all. Also outside their box and not aware of it whatsoever.
Mr. Johnson said, in response to a suggestion from Lee Kane, I think a Monday coronavirus Cobra meeting with the Prime Minister as chair, very important to show grip, suggested to Martin Reynolds earlier, so think he's handling. Dominic Cummings, yeah, we should pencil in an interview early next week on this too. We've got to sort stuff out over the next few days, but Monday must be a new level. And Mr. Johnson says at the end of this particular thread, not sure if it can wait till Monday. There's no reference there to the possibility that he'd been asked to come back earlier, or that there should be a Cobra while he was in.
Who's telling fibs?
Is there?
No.
And he asked, or he said, I'm not convinced we're showing grip on Corona. We need to have a Cobra. Not sure it can wait until Monday. There had been 4 Cobras already, had there not?
I don't know how many there've been.
Well, you know that there were 4 or 5 Cobras up to that point.
Yeah, something like that.
But he had hitherto not shown any inclination to take a grip by chairing a Cobra himself.
Correct.
On page
Nor was, to
48,
be fair to him, nor was the system generally pushing him to.
well, your evidence is that
What's
you
the
might not have wanted
system?
him to chair a Cobra in any event because you were fearful for what he might say.
Ah,
All conversations. My point was the official system wasn't pushing him to try and do a Cobra, as far as I recall, but we also weren't trying to push the official system to do it because we were fearful that it would actually be counterproductive.
So you were in part responsible.
it would be. Hang on, you listen to what he said then. We were in fear it'd be counterproductive. What, to have the meeting or to not have the meeting?
If he was allowed to chair Cobra.
As I said, the system wasn't pushing him to, and I didn't think it was wise to try and force the system to change its mind. I thought it
What system? There wasn't a system in place.
was 8.
And it's Boris is following it. So what one are you following it? What one are you following? Yeah? This is the problem of being an independent limited company, mate. You didn't write your book before you fucking started fucking playing the game. Maybe time to go fish, eh?
Mr. Johnson asked for a conference call at 5. Could you scroll back out, please? At the bottom of the page, Lee Kane, can we have a PM update call today? Mr. Johnson, frankly, there is no limit to the stuff I'm willing to do to show we are gripping this. By this time, Mr. Cummings, it was becoming apparent that there was a complete absence of planning or of significant plans. There had been, well, it was evident that there was no means of controlling the spread of the virus once it had reached the United Kingdom. It was plain that there was sustained community transmission from the number of cases the DHC were reporting by the end of February. why was the Prime Minister left in a position in which only now he was saying there's nothing I won't do to try to get a grip on this crisis?
What's missing in between?
The fundamentals of this.
Chin, hand again.
While he was on holiday, the system didn't push him to come back from his holiday. However, in the last week of February, everything started to move dramatically differently.
How?
Everything kind of kicked off in northern Italy.
Blame it on somewhere else?
Yeah, and the media suddenly
Media's fault?
was suddenly dominating. And that
Dominating him? What, his opinion?
shifted. We in number 10
Oh, so now it was shifted in Whitehall.
things were problematic. For example, PHE, the agency in charge of, nominally in charge of dealing with this, had come to number 10 and to me asking for help with the communications.
Hang on, but was the communications, was it just said about the media? Who's feeding who?
So we were starting to, and also, as you know, there's an email from that on the 25th of February, I was saying, where are all of these red teams? Where's all of this testing and whatnot that Hancock promised us existed? Where are these documents? And we, number 10, was starting to get a feel for the absence of things and a feel for the fact that the first wave of all the communications plans was a nightmare, etc.
Mr. Cummings, you say the system didn't push him to come back. The system didn't regard it as a crisis. The system didn't do that. But
It's down to half-cock, I reckon.
why weren't you pushing for these things?
Pushing for what?
For him to come back and
I reckon you made half-cock look like the penis he is, in my opinion.
At a time when the system was not pushing him to say this is a crisis. If he'd come back on the 15th of February, he'd have said what he'd already been saying in the previous 10 days, which is, this is all balls, it's all swine flu, the real danger is the economy, blah, 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 blah.
So it's all balls.
To me,
He's digging these people real holes, isn't he?
me and Patrick and others were very worried about it. Of course, these things are a very fine balance.
Of course you were worried about it. Who's got what shares where, and whose wives or fathers or mothers or aunties or uncles or brothers and sisters bought shares in what?
And how we handled this nightmare problem.
you say that there was a step change or...
Nightmare problem. What, the fact he didn't have the stuff in place, or the actual thing itself?
delay mitigate, which was described by Mr. Warner in an email to you and others, that it wasn't a plan, it was a communication framework.
Yeah.
You understood perfectly well that...
Communication framework. That's not a procedure to follow.
Did you alert people to the fact that a plan for contain, delay, mitigate was likely to be of little use, given that containment had already failed?
There were certainly, at this time, growing conversations, this time, i.e. when this plan was published. As you refer to, Ben Warner was immediately astonished when he saw this document.
Somebody else was astonished, but he wasn't.
This contributed to our growing sense that, hang on a second, we've been told that we're the best prepared in the world. We've been told that all of these things exist. This document is obviously pretty much a joke. Like, what the hell is going on? So yes, at that time,
So they were WTF.
there was an exponential curve of the virus, but there was also an exponential curve of alarm in the PM's office and elsewhere in the system.
Where are the emails from you saying, as the Chief Advisor of the Prime Minister, our sole and primary coronavirus action plan, contain, delay, mitigate, is a joke?
I don't know if there are such emails.
During the course of that week, more and more evidence came to light, both of the spread of the virus in Italy, which had increased fivefold. More measures were proposed to combat the spread of COVID in the Lombardy and other northern provinces. And as you've described in your statement, Mark Warner and you debate on the 7th of March your incipient concerns about Plan A. On the 10th of March, so a matter of days after your concern had started to emerge about the whole strategic direction that the government had embarked upon, the Civil Contingency Secretariat prepared a note, 49583, in which the director of the CCS stated in paragraph 1, COVID-19 looks increasingly likely to become a global pandemic, although this is not yet fully certain. The note sets out the views of the CCS as to the need to have fast-track legislation to effectively manage the outbreak. It deals with excess death management and the need for plans to be.
Where is that document from?
Did you or anybody else push back against this document and say it is absurd to believe that a COVID-19 global pandemic is not yet fully certain, given the concern?
Who signed that document and who authorised its transfer to other people outside of the company?
Having, as you say, having spoken to Mark and others over the weekend and over the over the previous week.
Hang on, I'm just shunting myself about a bit again.
As you can see from multiple messages from this day onwards, I was very concerned, and this document also was one of many documents that appeared at that time that seemed to some of us in Number 10 to make clear that the system was miles off the pace.
Because they no longer, well, they simply didn't reflect the change in thinking or the emerging understanding as to how far the virus had spread and the absence of means to control it.
Also, I think a really.
They keep messing with my positioning, don't they, eh? I think they're playing games. They're playing ping pong with my pictures.
An underrated aspect is the speed.
We're getting
one
there.
Of the things that's very striking looking back, preparing for this,
they're playing silly buggers.
How,
where shall I put myself? Shall I go back down here again? They're playing ping pong with my picture. It's quite funny. Yeah, no.
Even in the week of, even when you go forward a week to the 16th, and indeed even if you go forward another week to the 23rd, the week of the lockdown, there are still documents repeatedly coming through from CCS and COBRA and the Cabinet Office showing the crisis peaking in end of May, beginning of June. And I think this is really critical to understand. The fact that that was still on graphs in the week of the 26th is genuinely astonishing in retrospect, because of course it's completely false. A critical thing at this point on the 9th.
Keep watching, fellas, and fellas. I'll see you in a sec.
Partly because Mark Warner, at this point, he had his data team embedded with the NHS, and they were getting better and better data out of the NHS. This is the period when we in Number 10, to some extent, started to short-circuit the Cabinet Office system and CCS, because we were getting information directly from the NHS. And we started to realise, hang on, there is a fundamental mismatch between the shape of the curve that's coming out of these graphs coming from COBRA and the Cabinet Office, peaking at the end of May, June, and the information that we're getting from the NHS, which is showing that the crisis is almost upon us. So this was increasingly alarming all the way through this. On the 9th, I think it was, I asked Imran, again, this was not supposed to be a job for SPADS and it was not supposed to be a job for Number 10. And I said to Imran, please get in touch with Simon Stevens' office and get data directly from Stevens' office to here so that we can see what they're talking about. You can also see chatter between Warner and Patrick on this exact subject.
Pause there. That's a very long answer. I'm going to ask you about Ben Warner. He received an email from Professor Neil Ferguson on the 10th of March in which Professor Ferguson asked him to show or to distribute to the Prime Minister and Cabinet documents relating to the surge demand and daily number of deaths that were likely. So that was another source of information coming into Number 10 at that time.
Yeah.
On the 10th of March, the Cheltenham Festival commenced. And on the same day, Public Health England data presented at SAGE suggested that the true number of cases in the United Kingdom, what was to be measured in the tens of thousands. Professor Ferguson challenged Number 10 officials at that SAGE meeting and asked them, do you know what an epidemic with 4,000 to 6,000 deaths per day would feel like? What was the reaction in Number 10 when that information was relayed back to you?
Well, it contributed to our growing sense that something had gone horrifically wrong.
Hello everybody, this is the Dodgy Git Show 77. You're live and direct here from the UK. It's 18 minutes to 4 in the afternoon here. It's alright outside, but overcast and a little breeze. It's getting cold now. Thanks for joining me. We're here at the Covid-19 inquiry and we've got Mr. Cummins sat there. He was the government advisor for Boris and he was chatting with Matt Hancock. So we're going to keep live streaming here with the live feed, live and direct from the Covid inquiry. Thanks for picking me. Thanks for clicking me. If you're not gonna trick me, then you can stay and click the other buttons there, like everybody says to do. Yeah. Thanks for joining me. I'm Dodgy Git. Just having a chill session here. Having a cup of tea, out of the way a minute. I'll pop back and see what they're chatting about in a minute. I'm just having a little resting my eyes from looking directly at stuff. Yeah, I'll see you in a sec. I'll be back. I'll leave this running for you, and then we'll come back and click in and off, on and off. Watch the dates with all this, because the dates are bouncing backwards and forwards. Yeah, and note down names and who's responsible for what, right? Because it's all blame game.
Fundamental question. All sensible people can see the trajectory and how social distancing will be needed to flatten the curve. Very sensible people. People are saying the risks of delay are much higher than the risks of going too soon. And then you say in capital letters a little further down the page, why wait 5 days? Why not move now and flatten the curve earlier?
Yeah.
Was your appeal heard, Mr. Cummings?
No.
Why not?
It's a very complex question to which I don't have a clear answer. I think, well, obviously, at this point, SAGE people are still going on TV saying, well, the plan is herd immunity and it makes sense. So the fundamental Plan A strategy was in place on the 11th. But there was also at this point this concept of, quote, behavioural fatigue, unquote, that people kept referring to. And I think this is a really critical question.
Well, then just pause there. On behavioural fatigue, what was the genesis of this notion that if you went too early, people would struggle to sustain their commitment?
So we were told...
See how it works? Oh, he's got his hands on his head. He's trying to dominate.
From SAGE and Spy B. However, obviously, since then...
He thinks he's got a route out.
People have all rushed to try and claim that it was not me. So I don't think it's actually been... I don't know what the answer to this is.
He's probably mentioned that and acting like that because that's exactly what he did.
Then, because of course some of us have worked on political campaigns and we knew that an awful lot of stuff coming from so-called behavioural scientists.
Big up yourself, Mr. Cummins. Big up yourself, Mr. Cummins. Now.
So we were worried about this, but
well done,
in that week, a critical meme that kept being repeated was, this has to be done at the right time, this has to be done at the right time.
When you say the PM was told and I was told, so that we are clear, Mr. Cummings, who told you that there was a problem with maintaining commitment?
Yeah, it was someone else,
this
right?
was referred to by Patrick and by Chris in their briefings in the PM's office, though they said that this had come from SAGE.
Oh, so it's second-hand, so it's third-hand news then, is it? A load of joke, load of
This was all
flaffle.
intimately bound up, of course, with the
It was intimately
understanding of
bound up.
herd
Yeah, there it
immunity,
was.
the one-way strategy.
One way,
You've
I
got
bet
to
it's
allow
got more
people
than fucking one way, wasn't it?
You've got to allow parts of the population to become infected. That will reduce the risk of an uncoiled second wave, and so on and so forth.
You go and do things like that, you probably will end up infected, wouldn't you?
Hold that you couldn't go too soon because whatever measures were put in place were unsustainable.
So, A, that they might be unsustainable, but B, remember the fundamental distinction that if you're going for a single peak strategy, then they didn't want to go too soon because that would actually suppress things and then the thing would just pop back up straight away.
Indeed.
And that's why when you asked, was my question properly answered? In the all caps here, why not move now and flatten curve earlier? That logic is the logic of Gowers and Hassabis and the Warners. That logic is logic of if you are actually not going to do a single peak, if you are actually going to try and control it and suppress it now, then the simple logic of exponential curves means that, of course, the sooner you do it, the better. But that was not what the planning assumption was on the 11th.
Were you readily persuaded that the herd immunity approach, or rather the one-wave strategy, was the wrong way to go?
It's obviously very hard to reconstruct psychology exactly, but I would say that by this time of so certainly in the week of the 9th, 10th, 11th, I had growing doubts on an hourly basis. By the 11th, I was pretty much so by the 11th, my view was, I've got an appalling feeling that I'm in one of those like historic catastrophes, like July 1914. I'm not completely sure of it, but I've got some very smart people coming to me saying, this is fundamentally the strategy is wrong, misconceived, but also at a practical level at this point, remember, I was sitting in an office and suddenly overhearing people having phone calls about whether local authorities could book out ice rinks and get trucks to carry.
I've got to come back in here. Oh, it's paranoia, isn't it? Paranoia fed by somebody else. So now he's going on about his opinion, but he was hearing stuff. Oh no, he was hearing stuff.
A fundamental argument, is the strategy misconceived or not? But we also had this sort of growing cascade of nightmare conversations going on around us when we realised that the system was just completely out of control in terms of coping with its original plan A.
Could we have 173144, please, on the screen, page 1?
Got an ice cream van, anyone?
With Damon Pools, dated the 23rd of May. Says,
how many ice cubes can you get in a slaughterhouse?
What Dom was pushing until he was finally persuaded to drop it in early March. Is that a fair assessment?
Well, it's obviously laughable.
When did it become apparent that modelling to be necessary in order to drive home the point that with the number of deaths and hospital cases that were the inevitable result of the infection fatality rate and the hospitalisation rate, the healthcare system would be likely to be overwhelmed?
So Mark and Ben Warner raised this with me from
Somebody else's fault.
Of the 10th, 11th of March. But when it really came home very starkly was after
Dinner.
the Monday, Imran, but somehow between us anyway, Imran and I asked the NHS to provide their data, which for some odd reason.
Don't give the credit to the other guy though, right?
And there's references to that between Warner and Valence as well. That data arrived and I asked to get Simon Stevens in to present it, which I think happened on the 12th. All the records are a bit iffy on that day for reasons that you're aware of. But when we saw these NHS documents and Mark Warner explained the background of it, that's what really made things incredibly stark, because you suddenly had these two completely divergent sets of graphs, one from the NHS and one from the COBRA system.
On the 12th, there was a cabinet meeting. On the 11th of March, there was a cabinet meeting, 56132. At page 4, the Secretary of State for Health and Social Care said this to Cabinet.
Who was that then?
At 2/3 of the way down the page. Without these symptoms, the symptoms of a dry cough and temperature, it was highly unlikely that someone was suffering from coronavirus. By the 11th of March, was it generally well understood in Downing Street that a large percentage, a large proportion of this disease, for the viral spread, in fact, was transmitted asymptomatically?
It was, and Mr. Hancock had made this point in multiple ways, and sowed chaos by saying this. He was repeatedly told by Patrick Vallance that what he was saying was wrong, but he kept saying it. He said it here, and if you notice, it makes its way into statements that have been provided to this inquiry. So this false meme lodged itself in crucial people's minds. I don't understand, never understood why Hancock said this, but Patrick Vallance made extremely clear to me and to others in Number 10 that what Hancock was saying was factually wrong.
On the 12th of March, you messaged the Prime Minister raising concerns. Part of the message was put to Mr. Kane earlier in the course of evidence, but I'd like it back, please, on the screen. 48313, page 22.
Back by Dope Demand. Welcome to the Dodgy Good Show. This is Dodgy Good Show 77, live direct at the COVID Inquiry, UK. Dominic Cummins up on the
You
stand.
see there the 12th of March date. This is the reference to the need to chair daily meetings in the Cabinet Room. If you then go over the page, please, to page 23. The overwhelming danger here is being late and the NHS implodes like zombie apocalypse film, not being a week early. What did you mean by that?
So, you mean the last...
It was like the last film I watched on Friday night with my missus.
We'd got the data that I'd asked for from the NHS, and we'd seen these graphs. And it was clear, it made starker not only the scale of the problem,
I saw a graph. I got a spreadsheet. I saw a spreadsheet. Somebody made a PowerPoint with a kitten in it.
Had been told, and that the Cabinet Office
Fucking
understood, and it was on all of these official graphs. And secondly,
I forgot to look at the
to me,
scale.
almost worse than this was, like, what on earth is going on? Like, how can we be in a situation where the NHS has these graphs showing that we are days away from having to make a decision on what to do to stop this nightmare?
Who was giving them that? Who was the NHS? See, NHS, see? Now you try and find some transparent traceability in the NHS, yeah? And try and avoid, what was it again? We go back to that thing again, wasn't it? Collective responsibility, yeah? From NHS team, yeah? Load of dog tripe, mate, yeah? Now we're getting there, hey? You're listening in live and direct to Dodgy Get UK, programme 77.
Said while babbling about chickenpox, God fucking help us. What was being said about chickenpox, Mr. Cummings?
So there was a meeting in the PM study roughly noon on this day, and there was a conversation, and in the conversation the Cabinet Secretary said to the PM, you should go on TV and you should explain that, this is like the old days with chickenpox and people are going to have chickenpox parties, and the sooner a lot of people get this and get it over with, the better, sort of thing. And this has been mentioned before, this analogy, and I said, Mark, you should stop using this analogy of chickenpox parties, and the Cabinet Secretary said, why? And Ben Warner said, because chickenpox doesn't spread exponentially and kill thousands and thousands of people. And the look on people's faces when Ben said this, that was quite a crystallizing moment, because it made us, A, think, who on earth is briefing the most important official in the country along these lines? This is terrifying. But also other officials obviously heard this exchange, and some of them came to us and said,
Influence, compounded influence.
All right.
Hearsay and gossip.
13th of March.
Dangerous little knowledge, isn't it? Some knowledge is dangerous.
Meeting in the evening involving yourself and others, at which a plan B, to use your wording, was sketched out on a whiteboard. It's at 48313, page 3. If you could just scroll in, please, we can reacquaint ourselves with this whiteboard. Essentially, Mr. Cummings, and if you would just simply confirm yes or no, this whiteboard was the first emanation of Plan B, which recognised that to stop the NHS collapsing, there would have to be consideration probably of a lockdown. And of course, it deals with the number of deaths that would occur in a reasonable worst case scenario. It deals with issues as to how you deal with contact, what the differences are between Plan A and B, who not to save, i.e. who is at risk, and full lockdown before collapse.
yeah.
And this whiteboard is moved around.
Who not to
Downing
save?
Street, I
Did
think,
you
like
hear
thesis.
that? Who not to save? So actually the definition of the vulnerable is the ones that not to save, right? See how they twist the words around. Look at their little whiteboard. Look, they weren't even using the computer. That was bad as me in my last job, yeah? Had to make the freaking system up as I go along because nobody knew what the fuck was going on. Fucking funny, actually. If I can try that all over again, I'll
So how do
certainly
we
do
win
it
the herd
differently.
immunity argument? Was that because, notwithstanding the information which had been received from the scientists, from Professor Ferguson, from the NHS, your incipient understanding of the wave of death that was to ensue, it was still thought in number 10 Downing Street that herd immunity was the way forward?
Yes, but at this point on Friday evening, 13th of March, Plan A remained Plan A. And also, of course, what the PM's specifically referring to is, at that point in that week, multiple scientists, including the CSA and John Edmonds, had been on TV explaining the herd immunity the herd immunity basic Plan A. But there'd been a lot of pushback from it. The PM was nervy and was saying, you know, how are we going to explain this better, and how are we going to get this argument out?
All right. The next day, on the Saturday, there were a number of meetings. There was also a long debate on WhatsApp between the Chief Scientific Advisor, the Chief Medical Officer, Mr. Hancock, the Prime Minister, and yourself. Could we have 48399? And I don't want to spend too much time on this WhatsApp thread, but it shows on pages 3, 4, and 6 a fairly extensive debate about how herd immunity as an argument can still be advanced, if it is to be advanced at all, but also how concentration now needs to be focused on measures to be taken to avoid transmission and save lives. And I think on page 3, 1403, the 14th of March at 7:39, Mr. Johnson says, thank you, agreed totally with above. That's why I was concerned when some on the team were suggesting last week that we actively need a proportion of population to be infected. And if you could just scroll back out. Civil service need to grasp. So the Prime Minister understood that there was a problem here with whether or not the system, as you would describe it, or the civil service, as he would describe it, understood the danger, understood the need for a change in strategy, the need to understand that there was no time to be lost.
I think that's oversimplifying things, if I may say so respectfully. If you look at the chronology, some of these messages start early in the morning, and some of these messages are in the evening, and an awful lot happened that day. You know, in the morning, the PM is still essentially in Plan A mode. Then there is a meeting that I organised. There's an official meeting, and then there's a second meeting, and the situation. I think what the PM's mind and other people's minds, including Patrick, were very different, even in this between morning and evening on this day. It was a day of kind of psychological transition for a lot of people.
The whole thread shows that evolution in thinking. If we could go to page 6, we can see at 10:49 a.m. Mr. Johnson says, no time. Although I now can't see it. Yes, thank you very much. 10:49, 15 seconds. Johnson Boris, seeing what happened in Italy, we simply have, in capital letters, no time.
Mm-hmm.
Over that weekend of the 14th and 15th, there are, as I said, a number of meetings. Sage is asked to model lockdown. You're in touch with Timothy Gowers to ask him for his help, and he says you've got to move urgently to extreme containment measures, correct?
Yep.
253942, page 3. You asked him for his views, and he says you've got to move urgently to extreme containment measures. There we are, about a third of the way down the page. I now think that we should move urgently to extreme containment measures. Then, on that Saturday, the 14th of March, at the officials' meeting in the morning, Number 10 was informed that matters, the outbreak was further along the curve than had been thought. And there was a private meeting, was there not, between 9:01 and 9:10 with the Prime Minister, yourself, Cleo Watson, Lee Kane, Imran Shafi and Stuart Glasborough, where you wheeled in your whiteboard and you took the Prime Minister through the problem.
Yep.
In light of what Mr. Kane said earlier, can you make plain, please, though, that it doesn't appear as if any decision was made during the course of the weekend for a lockdown. It is that there was a change in the strategic approach of the government. There was a realisation that there had to be a change of approach and much more stringent measures were likely to be required, but no actual decision was made to impose a national lockdown.
Correct. That the way I would describe it is that we had the conversation with the PM on the Saturday morning. We told him our concerns that Plan A was heading for a catastrophe. I then, after that, spoke to Patrick Vallance and articulated my concerns and my ideas about a Plan B that was sketched on the whiteboard. Patrick Vallance had clearly changed his mind in various ways as well, as I referred to in my text with the PM. And I agreed with Patrick that we would organise a meeting on this Sunday at which he and I jointly would try to articulate a different way forward. But I was very keen for him to do this rather than me, for obvious reasons.
And
right, everybody, I hope you get the gist of how this system and process of scrutiny and inquiry goes in the British system. I'm gonna just bring myself in here. Yeah, there we go. Hello, everybody. Oh no, it's flipped myself around again. There we go. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. Hang on, I've got to flip the other way up. There we go. There we go. I think I'm in the room now. I'm going to close that one down anyway. Yeah. Right, we're back in the room. Hello, everybody. Thanks for staying tuned. Thanks for tuning in to the 77th Dodgy Git Show. Hopefully you've stayed with me this long. You've pressed the subscribe button and you'll join me again for Dodgy Git Show 78. Won't be long. I'll find something else to moan about. you've got the inquiry there. You can go online and you can watch the rest of it. You get the general idea and you get how I would pick it to pieces. Yeah, I'll pick it to pieces and see where we go, because sometimes somebody's telling a fib here and there, and when it's not documented, yeah, it's difficult. Anyway, I've just used the online MOT checker to check if my vehicle has passed its MOT, which I'm very pleased to say it has. Unfortunately, there are more than one item that is on the advisory list. So for the next 12 months, I shall be trying to find somewhere that can fix my vehicle. Yeah, there's quite a bit of work needs doing, but yeah, we see how we go. He's just had 2 new trainers on it, so we'll probably do a bit of work as we go through the year, eh? Do one bit at a time, one system at a time, so we don't buck up and make mistakes, yeah? Or just take it to the main dealer and pay the frickin' bill, yeah? Some of it's getting 15 years old, my car now. Gone through 123,456 miles last week. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And now just had its MOT today. It's passed. It's got 2 new rear trainers on it. Few advisories, but I'm going to pick it up now. So I'm going to have to, I'm going to share my love again on it, yeah? Lots of love here from Dodgy Git, sharing it to you, whoever's watching out there, so you've got some love to share about to other people. Thanks for joining me for the Covid-19 inquiry, where Dominic Cummings was being questioned on the stand. So, was it a stand? I don't know, it's just an inquiry, and it's just having a chin wag and a chat about what happened. Anyway, thanks for joining me. I'm Dodgy Git, and this has been the Dodgy Git Show. I'll see you again.